3, 2, 1.
When the Aloft Hotel opened in early June, it became one of 4 new hotels in downtown El Paso.
We have games for people to just hang out, with lots of connections. There's plugs for charging your phones.
Heidi Poole's a veteran of hotels in Texas and New Mexico. She's the general manager.
I love the grandioseness of it. I like that when you walk in from this modern environment, which is really nice, and you walk through these doors and it's almost like you step back in time.
Those doors she mentions take you to an elevator lobby, preserved just as it was when O.T. Bassett Tower first opened in 1930. The Loft is one of 3 new hotels inside very old buildings. El Paso is home to more than 100 historic structures, including a hotel opened by Conrad Hilton himself in 1930, a private high-stakes gambling club from the Roaring '20s, and perhaps more than 100 buildings designed and built by legendary architect Henry C. Trost and his family, most more than 100 years old. Some of those buildings, after decades of neglect, are getting a second chance. Some, but not all.
The story of modern restoration and preservation in El Paso is largely a story of 3 men. The first is Paul Foster. He bought the Ensign Mills building. That's the one behind me. It's a building designed by Trost. It initially opened in 1911. Foster bought it in 2008, started a 3-year restoration project. It reopened in 2011. And this building, when it reopened in 2011, started a renaissance in downtown El Paso. The second person in this story is Lane Gaddy. Gaddy bought the building behind me, O.T. Bassett Tower, another building built by Trost and his family. Gaddy got his hands on this building in 2014, started a 4-year project to restore it. It opened in May 2018 as the Aloft Hotel, a division of Marriott Hotels. The third person in this story is a man named Billy Abraham. Billy Abraham at one time owned as many as 15 buildings in El Paso. Many of those buildings also designed and built by the architect Henry Trost. The difference is Abraham's had some of these buildings since 1980, and not a one has been restored. Many of them are in a condition like this one behind me for years, not at all contributing to the restoration and revitalization of downtown El Paso.
Abraham inherited the buildings from his father and owed $1 million in property taxes and another $1 million in fines. He declared bankruptcy. In the fall of 2018, Paul Foster and Associates bought half a dozen buildings from Billy Abraham with an offer to buy many more, according to El Paso Inc. Foster earned his money as CEO of Western Refining and is already restoring the Plaza Hotel on Union Plaza, built in 1912. Back then, El Pasoans stood on the roof of El Camino Real Hotel on El Paso Street to watch the Mexican Revolution as it happened. Mexican revolutionaries recruited fighters, including Pancho Villa, in the Caples building on San Antonio Street.
Okay, you've learned about these people. Well, these people were inside these buildings that are in downtown, and you can live history that way.
Melissa Aris is president of the Texas Trost Society, founded in 2014 to preserve and protect historic architecture in El Paso.
Right before we had formed the Trost Society, there were several demolitions of perfectly good Trost buildings. And not only that, but they were enacting this big master plan that called for demolishing Segundo Barrio, which is a lot of adobes from the time that El Paso was first founded. And they built a ballpark that was abutting the San Francisco Heights Historic District. And I was concerned about how it would affect the quality of the life of the residents who are living there, who are generally low income.
Concern for the poor, though, is a two-way street. Preservationists and developers have both advocated for historic reservation, and that usually means tax breaks and other subsidies.
So in Texas, we're very fortunate because they gave 25% tax credit. And if you combine that with the federal tax credit, which is 20%, also the El Paso Economic Development Office also provides some economic incentives such as tax abatements. There's also the El Paso Downtown Management District, and they provide facade grants.
Those incentives add up. The city of El Paso alone awarded subsidies on 24 properties since 2013. Some are historic downtown properties. Some are in transit-oriented districts where it's easy to catch a bus. Other subsidies are for job creation. Over the last 5 years, El Paso has agreed to $30 million in subsidies. More than $3 million went to Lane Gaddy for apartments and for the new hotel. Running the Aloft brings about 30 jobs to town. Incentives totaled $1.6 million. Critics say that's money that could be spent on programs for the poor, like low-income housing or jobs programs.
If it was in the form of a check, that's accurate, but in this case, it's abatement of future appreciation of value. So that value would not be there if you don't have the development.
In other cities, like Austin, development in historic areas can mean displacing the poor. But many of the buildings being restored in El Paso were underused or even vacant. Lane Gaddy runs a very successful recycling center. He also leads a group of investors that just opened the Loft Hotel and Loft Apartments downtown.
Yeah, I think preservation is a big part of it, but also paving a clear path to the future. So you're really juxtaposing both the history and encapsulating the history, but you're also showcasing where downtown and El Paso in general is going.
For Texas State Multimedia, I'm Kelly Kaufhold.